He said, yeah, it's in the Bible. God has a phone number. Jeremiah 3:33. Just call it and you'll see. So I looked it up, and I invite you to look up Jeremiah 33:3. And this is God's phone number. Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 3. Call to me, and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. Doesn't that fit? Jeremiah 3:3. So, if you're ever in a problem, that's the number to call. Jeremiah 3:3, not 911. What's that? No. No. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding, but acknowledge him in all your ways, in all your ways, and he will guide your paths. One of my favorite characters, there's several, but one of my favorite characters in the Bible is Joshua. And I invite you to turn to the book of Joshua, because we're going to be there most of the time. Joshua. I held on to what God told Joshua when James was in the hospital with valley fever. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore, and this is in verse 9. I swore to their forefathers to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the laws my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. And then he repeats, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So he had good reason to be strong and courageous. God told him directly, be strong and courageous. Yes, he did. And it was because God told him this because he was going to take over the leadership of Moses. And if we go into the history of the Israelites, we'll go directly to where they were going to cross the Jordan. And it so happened that at that time they had extra rain and the banks were overflowing. You know, it was flooded. The Jordan was flooded at that time, at that year. And so now they had to cross the Jordan. And from the number that crossed the Red Sea, there was only a few. Joshua, Caleb, all the rest had died. And they were getting ready to cross. And in Joshua chapter 3, verse 5, Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. And Joshua was just following the instructions that God had given him to cross the Jordan. And in verse 6 it says, Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it and went ahead of them. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when they reach the edge of the Jordan waters, to go and stand in the river. A flooding river. They were to walk right into it. What faith it must have taken to go into a river that was flooded. By God's command. And what happened as soon as those priests stepped into the water? The same thing that happened with the Red Sea. Oh, that must have been a sight. And it didn't part here. The water that was coming stopped. And the one that was flowing down just kept flowing. So that one side just stopped. And the ground was dry. And so the priest went to the center of the river and waited for the people to cross over. So there was a connection. There was a deep connection between Joshua and God. There was communication between Joshua and God. Communication which is called what? Prayer. He kept in good contact. He was doing God's will, and God was blessing and guiding and did a miracle. You know, I was listening during the week. Actually, I was reading how somebody asked the question, can we prove that God exists through science? And the author was saying, you know, God made all the laws that exist, the law of gravity, and all the other laws. So if something were to be thrown up that was heavy, and God told it to float, He made the laws, right? So it would float. For example, remember when the prophet when the prophet loaned an axe to somebody, and what happened to it? It sank. But the law of gravity tells you that it's going to stay down, right? But what did God do? He made that thing float. So all the laws obey God. He's the one that created them. So if you step in the water, what's going to happen? Your foot's going to go in the water. You're going to get wet. But God made the laws obey Him. It was amazing. It would have been a sight to see. So their faith, they must have seen what an awesome God they served when they saw such a miracle. And what were they going into the land of Canaan for? To take it over, to do battle. Years before, remember, they were afraid because of the spies, the information the spies had brought back. They're giants over there. They're warriors. They're warlike people. We don't stand a chance. But now they were going in with faith, with confidence, not in themselves, but in God and in their new leader. They saw that God was with Joshua. And as long as Joshua was connected to God, there wasn't a problem. They knew that he was a very consecrated man of God. And so I get the impression that yes, they believed in God the people. But the leadership that was bestowed to Joshua and the connection he had with his God had a lot to do with the people also having faith. So they were getting ready, once they crossed the Jordan, to conquer Jericho. And Jericho, it's the wrong ones. Let me get the right ones here. I hope I didn't mix my papers up. Here we go. They were getting ready to go to Jericho. And Jericho was one of the most fortified cities in the land of Canaan. Big, thick walls, up high, with soldiers that were experienced in war. The Israelites, they weren't trained to be warriors, to be soldiers. But yet here they were getting ready to attack Jericho. And Joshua saw the importance of his connection with God. And the Spirit of Prophecy in Patriarchs and Prophets says, to reduce Jericho was seen by Joshua to be the first step in the conquest of Canaan. But first, what do you think he did first? But first of all, he sought an assurance of divine guidance, and it was granted him. Withdrawing from the encampment to meditate and to pray that the God of Israel would go before his people. Go to chapter 5, verse 13. So as Joshua was going out, withdrawing from the camp to go meditate and pray, this is what happened. Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" Who was he talking to? Look a little further down. The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." Who else did that? Who did that happen to? To Moses. And who was talking to him? God was talking to him. Jesus. And Joshua did so. So they had this conversation as they were there. The Spirit of Prophecy says, give me a second. Withdrawing to the encampment to meditate and to pray that the God of Israel would go before his people, he beheld an armed warrior of lofty stature, commanding presence, with his sword drawn in his hand. To Joshua's challenge, "Art thou for us or for our adversaries?" the answer was given, "As captain of the host of the Lord, I am now come." The same command given to Moses in Horeb. "Loose thy shoe from thy foot, for the place wherein thou standest is holy," revealed the true character of the mysterious stranger. It was Christ, the exalted one, who stood before the leader of Israel. Awestruck, Joshua fell upon his face and worshipped and heard the assurance, "I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor." And he received instruction for the capture of the city. So there's this connection. He was close to God, and he was seeking God's guidance in what to do. They had sent spies to go check out Jericho, and remember the prostitute Rahab had helped the two spies hide and escape, with the promise that they would be spared, because she had heard about God and God's people and that they were coming, and she believed that God was almighty. And so Jesus gives Joshua instructions on what was going to happen at Jericho. He didn't say, "Okay, I want you to take some dynamite and put it in the north wall." That would sound pretty good. That would be a good way to get in. We're going to blow up the walls. We're going to do this and that and the other. We're going to try and make the walls collapse. It was nothing like that. It was nothing like anybody would expect. It was different. So what did he do? Chapter 6, verse 3. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priest blowing the trumpet. When they hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have all the people give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the people will go up, everyone straight in. So here they come. And the citizens of Jericho are expecting them. They have, I'm sure I can visualize it. Their troops on the walls ready to fight. They're ready to defend themselves. And so the Israelites come in with the soldiers in front. And the Ark of the Covenant with the priests carrying it. And so the armies go marching around. These people from Jericho are waiting for the attack, and they go and they march around. The trumpets are blowing. Nothing's being said, just the trumpets are blowing, and they're going around the city. What do you think the people on the walls are thinking? What are they up to? They finish their route around the city, and they go back to their encampment. What were those people thinking? I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. The Spirit of Prophecy says, the captain of the Lord's host communicated only with Joshua. He did not reveal himself to the congregation, and it rested with them to believe or doubt the words of Joshua, to obey the commands given by him in the name of the Lord, or to deny his authority. They could not see the host of angels who attended them under the leadership of the Son of God. They might have reasoned, what unmeaning movement are those, and how ridiculous the performance of marching daily around the walls of the city. These are the thoughts of might have been the thoughts of the people in Jericho. Blowing trumpets of ram's horns. This can have no effect upon those towering fortifications. So they come again. And again. And again. And again. 6 days they did that. But Joshua had commanded the people, do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. That's verse 10. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the people returned to the camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early, verse 12, the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. I can see those soldiers up on top of those towers, up on the walls, with their bows and their arrows ready to shoot, anxious for a battle. By the 4th or 5th day, I can see them leaning. Here they come again. What are they up to? More relaxed, or these guys are crazy if they think they're going to, how are they going to get in here? I mean, you can think all kinds of things these people was going through their minds. That's probably what some of them thought. There was a purpose to what God was doing. Why? No. Why was he allowing this? Let me find it. But the very plan of continuing this ceremony through so long a time prior to the final overthrow of the walls afforded opportunity for the development, let me find the next page, of faith among the Israelites. It was to be impressed upon their minds that their strength was not in the wisdom of man nor in his might, but only in the God of their salvation. They were thus to become accustomed to relying wholly upon the divine leader. Now listen to this. God will do great things for those who trust in him. What did Proverbs say? Pretty much the same thing. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In doing such a thing, like marching around the city, not saying a word, nothing, just marching around the city, there was a purpose. The reason why his professed people have no greater strength is that they trust so much to their own wisdom, and do not give the Lord an opportunity to reveal his power in their behalf. I was thinking of Desmond Doss when I was reading this, and how he refused to do his work on Sabbath, and how he asked to have the Sabbath off, and the odds were against him. Human wisdom would have told you this guy's going to the brig, and that's it. I mean, he's in the United States Army, and he's disobeying the U.S. government. But God made a way, and he got Sabbath off. You know, he didn't say, what's the use? I mean, what can God do in this situation? But he held firm. He took the chance that he could get in trouble and be put in the brig, but he was willing to do that to obey God. And God honored it. His professed people have no greater strength. The reason why his professed people have no greater strength is that they trust so much to their own wisdom and do not give the Lord an opportunity to reveal his power in their behalf. He will help his believing children in every emergency if they will place their entire confidence in him and faithfully obey him. Remember what he's saying here. We're going to come back to that. So the seventh day comes. Verse 15. On the seventh day they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the people to shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all those who are with her in her house shall be spared. If you ever get the opportunity, you need to read this whole story in Patriarchs and Prophets. You'll get a blessing out of it. It is worth reading. But keep away from the devoted things so that they will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. When the trumpet sounded, the people shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the people gave a loud shout, can you imagine? The walls collapsed. That must have been a sight. So every man charged straight in, and they took the city, and they devoted the city to the Lord, and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men, women, young, old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. And the city was conquered. The city was conquered. Hebrews 11:30 says, by faith the walls of Jericho fell. By faith. They did exactly what God had commanded them. God had given them instructions, and they followed them to the T. And God did exactly what he said he would do. And they conquered the city. Let me get back to my right place. There it is. But what happens when you have such a victory? And I don't imagine they had any casualties. God was with them, protecting them. Doesn't say anything about casualties. They had a mighty victory. And so they had another city to conquer, and Joshua had already had in mind the city of Ai, or Ia, however you pronounce that. So he had plans on conquering it, and he sent spies to that place. And when the spies came back, they said, Joshua, they don't have a large military. We don't have to send the whole army. We just need to send about 3,000 men. We'll be good. We got this. They got overconfident and prideful. And they forgot to do Joshua as the leader, neglected to do something, to pray. If he had prayed, if he had connected with God, he would have known what God said in chapter 7, or what God thought. Verse 1. But the Israelites acted unfaithfully in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Camri, son of Zimri, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them, so the Lord's anger burned against Israel. So Joshua, it's a huge army. This is one man who took something that belonged to God. And so Joshua had no idea what had happened. But if he had connected with God, if he had withdrawn from the camp as he did before going to Jericho, the Lord would have met him there. He said, Joshua, we need to talk. This has happened. But Joshua didn't. They had had a great victory. They were overconfident, maybe even prideful, and they were ready to attack Ai. They were so confident that they only sent 3,000 men to attack the city of Ai. Now Joshua sent men from Jericho, verse 2, chapter 7, to Ai, and told them, "Go up and spy out the region." So the men went up and spied out. Okay, I'll say Ai instead of I. And then when they returned to Joshua, they said, "Not all the people will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men and take it, and do not weary all the people, for only a few men are there." So about 3,000 men went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this the hearts of the people melted and became like water. So Joshua, he's really upset. They tear their clothes and they throw ashes on themselves and they fall flat on the floor. Well, verse 6, then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. And the elders did the same and sprinkled dust on their head. And Joshua said, "Oh, now, look who Joshua is putting the blame on." And Joshua said, "O sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan." That's a different Joshua, isn't it? Yeah. It just sounds like a totally different person. "Oh Lord, what can I say now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do for your own great name?" And I like what the Lord says. The Lord said to Joshua, verse 10, "Get up." What are you doing? Stand up. Stand up. What are you doing on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I have commanded them to keep. There's a problem, he said. And he probably told them, if you had kept in communication, you would know what the problem is. One of your men broke the command I gave them, Achan. He didn't tell them exactly who it was, but they had to find out. He says, before you can move forward, you need to take care of this. You need to take care of it. And that in itself is a whole different message. It's a good message. I encourage you to read Patriarchs and Prophets on this story. The whole book is great, but the story of Achan, how he was discovered. He had time to confess, and he didn't. He waited till the last minute. Maybe they won't find out. But he was found out. For one man, a whole nation was punished for the sins of one. And so, when he was discovered, it wasn't only him that was punished, it was his family. And he was stoned, they were stoned to death. But after it was taken care of, verse 13, go and consecrate the people. Tell them, consecrate yourselves in the preparation for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. That which is devoted is among you. That which is devoted is among you, O Israel. You cannot stand against your enemies until you remove it. And once it was done, then they could proceed to Ai, and they conquered Ai. But that was a valuable lesson to Joshua and the people. You know, we make a lot of decisions. We make decisions every day. And do we take the time to pray about it? Important decisions with our children, our lives, our jobs. And we think God's not interested in it's just a small thing. But we fail to take it to the Lord in prayer. He might, a move we're going to make, a new job we're going to take, the person you are going to marry. We've already made up our minds. We get like Samson, who told his parents, you know, I like this Philistine woman, go get her for me. And the parents tell him, but isn't there a good Israelite woman that, no, I want her, go get her for me. Do you think Samson prayed about that? No, he had made up his mind, this is what I want. And how many times do we do the same thing? This is what I want. We don't take it to God in prayer. The important things, everything, not only the big things, the small things, we should take everything to God in prayer. As the hymn says, take it to the Lord in prayer. Jesus, who was God and man, was constantly in communication with his Father. He wasn't able to do what he did by himself. It was that connection that he had with the Father. Do you think he would have been able to make it through Calvary had he not had that connection with the Father? When he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed. He asked his friends to pray with him. And he knew what was coming. He knew it was going to be bad. The worst was the separation from his Father. That he even asked God, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. But not my will, but your will be done. We need to have that connection with God. You know, just like he gave the Israelites instructions on how to conquer Jericho, our instructions for life are right here. And if we take God at his word and believe him and follow his instructions, he will bless. But there are consequences when we go a different direction, and we neglect to have that connection with God. We neglect prayer. Prayer is so important. But he learned his lesson. And something happened in the near future. If you remember the history of the Israelites after this, the Gibeonites came, they heard about Joshua. They heard about the God of Joshua. And they were afraid. And they were one of the people that was going to be conquered. So they came disguised, remember? They came disguised like they had come from a faraway country to make a treaty with Joshua and the Israelites. And so when the other nations heard about the treaty, 5 kings got together to go take out Gibeon because they had made a treaty with the Israelites. And when the Gibeonites heard that the 5 kings were coming, they sent word to Joshua. Let's go there. It is chapter 10. We'll start with verse 9. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up positions against Gibeon and attacked it. Excuse me. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal, "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because of the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us." Now, what do you think Joshua did? Saddle up, guys. We're going to go help these. Spirit of prophecy says it very well. Joshua prepared to go at once to the relief of Gibeon. The inhabitants of the besieged city had fear that he would reject their appeal because of the fraud which they had practiced. But since they had submitted to the control of Israel and had accepted the worship of God, he felt himself under obligation to protect them. Now listen. He did not this time move without divine counsel. He learned his lesson. You're going to do something, you need to ask God's advice, God's guidance. And the Lord encouraged him in the undertaking. "Fear them not," was the message, "for I have delivered them into thine hand, and there shall not a man of them stand before thee." So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, and he of the people of war with him, and the almighty men of valor. So they marched all night to get there. And you think they had time to rest? They went straight to battle. God was with them, and they knew it. And God said, "Don't fear, because I'm with you, and I'm giving you the victory." So they had the confidence again, not in themselves, but in God. And so they routed them. But I got to read this, because this is amazing. Verse 9. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel, who defeated them in a great victory at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road going up to Beth Horon and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them from the sky. And more of them died from the hailstones than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. Can you imagine hail that big enough to kill a person? On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of all Israel. See, it was a huge army. 5 armies. 5 kings. They were routed. They were running. They were trying to get away. And Joshua said, if these men get away, they're going to regroup and we're going to have the same problem again. We need to get rid of the problem. And so we go into this verse. Verse 12. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, O sun, stand still over Gibeon. O moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down for a full day. Isn't that amazing? There has never been a day like it before or since, and a day when the Lord listened to a man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. That is amazing. This time it says, he did not neglect to get divine counsel. How many times have we made decisions that there have been consequences because we have not asked for divine counsel, taken it to God in prayer? Listen to what it says here. Give me a chance. Here it is right here. The Spirit of God inspired Joshua's prayer. That evidence might again be given that might be given of the power of Israel's God. Hence the request did not show presumption on the part of the great leader. Joshua received the promise that God would surely overthrow his enemies of Israel, yet he put forth as earnest effort as though success depended upon the armies of Israel alone. He did all that human energy could do, and then he cried in faith for divine aid. Okay, here comes the secret to success. The secret of success is the union of divine power with human effort. Those who achieve the greatest results are those who rely most implicitly upon the almighty arm. The man who commanded, "Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon," listen to this, is the man who for hours lay prostrate upon the earth in prayer in the camp of Gilgal. The men of prayer are men of power. So we have this powerful weapon called prayer, and we don't use it enough. And God is willing to give us success if we will listen to the advice of Solomon in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding, but acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will guide your paths. Sometimes the circumstances seem bleak. Sometimes there is a Jericho that we think we have to conquer, and the walls are high, and the enemy looks vicious, and their warriors look like they've had a lot more experience than we have. But we serve a mighty God. I heard a pastor in Oregon, at the camp meeting in Oregon, the only time I've ever been there, but it was a great sermon. He stated a mathematical equation which goes very against human wisdom, but it is a sound equation. We know that 1 plus 1 is what? 2. And we know that 2 plus 2 is what? But 1 plus God equals a majority. Remember that equation when the odds seem to be against you. And do not neglect prayer. Let's close, please, with the last hymn. I invite you to stand.